Monday to you. There is no weekend edition of Next, but if public officials are going to keep burying news on the weekends, we might be forced to go 7 days a week around here to cover Saturday afternoon special announcements, like the one from the Denver District Attorney, Beth McCann, saying that she's not going to charge anyone in the case of cheerleaders forced into splits at East High School. Our Marshall Zellinger wanted to know what that means for school employees who are mandated by law to report suspected abuse.
If we just had the videos are awful.
Denver District Attorney Beth McCann will not be charging anyone with a crime related to the East High School cheerleading forced splits.
The concern is that when you have a lot of conflicting statements, it casts doubt.
She's also not charging any school employees for not reporting to police the content of one of the forced splits videos after a parent emailed it to school leaders in June.
At that time, the decision should have been made to terminate the employment of Coach Williams, and I believe to report what was observed on the video to the police.
Denver Public Schools Superintendent Tom Boasberg found out about the videos on August 22nd after 9 Wants to Know submitted an open records request asking about them. As a result, the district hired a law firm to do its own investigation, which was released last month. In June, after a parent emailed one of the videos, then Principal Andy Mendelsberg was, quote, definitely concerned, and then Athletic Director Lisa Porter was quoted as saying that the video was awful and characterized it as torture. But neither of them, both mandatory reporters of child abuse under law, reported what they saw in the video to law enforcement.
Where did you fall on what you looked at, whether or not someone failed at being a mandatory reporter?
So the beginning of the statement says no criminal charges will be filed, and that includes the mandatory reporting. If I don't believe that I can bring child abuse as a crime against the coach, then it is inconsistent to then file failure to report child abuse.
For Next, I'm Marshall Zellinger.
The principal and the athletic director at East are out of their jobs. That was a separate determination from the criminal investigation. We want to stress here, despite what you just heard the DA say, Colorado's mandated reporter guidance stresses that adults are not to play judge and jury evaluating a potential child abuse case. They're just supposed to report concerns. Today, Denver Public Schools allowed us to see its video of the Manual versus Weld Central football game. Nothing on that tape supports the Manual High School principal's public accusation that the Weld Central team displayed the Confederate flag and used racial slurs at his historically black high school. The DPS tape of the game is very similar to Weld Central's tape of the game. Weld Central released their tape to us immediately weeks ago. So you just have an edited compilation of plays. It's field action. There's no sign of trouble. After DPS abandoned the Manual High School principal's claims of racist acts by the Weld Central team, we have been trying to obtain open records, emails, and texts that could explain the shifting claims made by that principal. DPS denied us access to some of those records, claiming a legal exemption for deliberative privilege. We have additional questions about why security camera images from that Manual Weld Central game were not released to the public under open records request by journalists, but were apparently provided to a candidate for school board, who then posted them on social media. That candidate, Tay Anderson, declined to tell us where he got access to the security images. He said he needed to talk to Manual High administrators before answering our questions. Real change is coming out of investigative reports that you have seen here for the last year. Chris Vanderveen's 9 Wants to Know series, Fueling the Fire, a long-term investigation that followed the fiery crash of a Flight for Life helicopter in Frisco. Now, people who own helicopters which are prone to catch fire during otherwise survivable crashes will at least be notified of that known risk. As we've repeatedly told you, thousands of those helicopters are in use today with antiquated fuel systems on board, systems that can easily rupture after relatively minor crashes. Today, we learned the FAA has issued what's known as a Special Airworthiness Bulletin. Basically, it tells all operators where to go to find out if their helicopter has the more sturdy fuel system. One hitch, though, this bulletin carries no regulatory muscle.
As a standalone, it is just an information bulletin saying we've identified this issue, we've had these accidents, there is a fix available. We suggest, highly suggest, firmly suggest that you use this or do this.
A more permanent solution could come as early as January, when the FAA will consider forcing manufacturers to do more. And speaking of change in the air after a 9 Wants to Know investigation, 6 months after our series of reports on a secret prison system that keeps Colorado's worst criminals hidden from the public and even their victims, the Colorado Department of Corrections is hinting that a change is coming. Anastasia Bolton from our 9 Wants to Know team looked into these prisons after the Aurora Theater shooting victims' families came forward and said to you that they had no idea where the mass murderer was being kept because the state wanted it to be a secret.
So Colorado swaps the worst of the worst inmates, Kyle, and we've talked about it before. It is called an Interstate Corrections Compact. It has been happening for years, and DOC says they don't disclose where those inmates are going, even to the victims. They say to keep the inmates and staff safer. But inmates get to write and call their families, so the trade is not completely secret. Many victims have told us they want to and feel they should know. And in his first on-camera interview with us on the subject, something that we've been asking for over a year, DOC's executive director, Rick Ramish, says the department is considering disclosing the location of the inmates to victims if there is no reason to hide it.
Our position is, and what we're discussing now, both internally and with others in the compact, is what you've been saying is that only under rare circumstances would we not tell the victim. If we have no reason to try and hide an identity of an inmate in another state, we'll be contacting the victims. In fact, my information is we told a few last week we're somewhere.
Now, we do not know when DOC plans to tell the other victims it deems appropriate. The governor's spokesperson tells us tonight that another time the location of an inmate may not be disclosed to the victims is when the receiving state asks for secrecy.
So, Anastasia, it seems like the floodgates were opened when the Aurora Theater shooter was moved to a federal prison. Federal prison says, sure, we'll tell you where he is. Right. He's now in Pennsylvania. We can't draw a direct line because the DOC is not telling us if this is a policy change or why some victims are now finding out.
So DOC says, Ramish says he went to a couple of meetings on a reform, and he decided that this was the way to go. We can't really nail down to why all of a sudden this is happening now, right? Because we've been asking about it for a while. The Aurora Theater victims have been asking about it for a while. So if it actually happens, well, I guess who cares who did this, right?
Sure.
If the victims see the results that they want to see, it's great.
And we can't remember that when the Aurora Theater shooting families found out where their son or daughter's killer was, that so many other families were waiting for that exact same answer. It'd be interesting to hear from the governor on this because he was so adamant that it should be kept a secret. All right, Anastasia, thank you.
Thanks.
There has been much talk of who precisely is coming into the U.S. these days on visas from the Muslim world. So we thought it might be useful to, meet some of them. Hasadullah and his family are settling into their new home in Longmont. He is an architect, currently looking for a job, so if you could use one whose work was good enough for the U.S. government in a war zone, meet Hasadullah Hassari and his family. He and his wife, Ruya, came here through special immigration visas for Afghans who worked for the U.S. government at great risk to themselves and their families. Their family lived in Kabul. Hasadullah worked with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, designing and building border crossings. Ruya was a school teacher and principal. It took them 3 years to have their application to come to the U.S. approved. They're living here now, they're learning English, and they're sharing their story of the decision to leave home.
No safety, no safety. Oh, because we want to leave Afghanistan. There is not safety, there is not peace, there is war. Every day there is explosion. If you going from home to work and to school, you don't know when you come back to home or not.
The decision to leave Afghanistan has split that family apart. The parents are here with their 3 youngest children who are now in school, but because those visas only allow unmarried children under the age of 21 to come to the U.S., the 22-year-old daughter is still in Afghanistan. Their 25-year-old son is living in Germany. For years, the attitude of America's largest makers of mass-produced beer has been, if you can't beat them, buy them. The parent company of Budweiser, AB InBev, has been a prolific purchaser of craft breweries, including Colorado's own Breckenridge Brewery. A craft beer trade group based out of Boulder now has a tongue-in-cheek campaign to buy Budweiser. Tonight, Brandon Ritteman sets down the politics to pick up a pint and explain why this is never going to happen.
There are actually 213 billion reasons it's not going to happen, Kyle. 213 billion is the current price of all of AB InBev's stock. That's too much money to wrap your head around, so let's have some fun with big numbers, shall we? To crowdfund $213 billion, you would need every person in the U.S., yes, the kids too, to donate $653.37. Of course, AB InBev's a global company, so if you took it worldwide, you could raise that kind of scratch if every human on Earth donated a mere $28.78. Now, if you paid attention in school, you'll remember you only have to own 50% of the shares in a company to take it over. So really, you can cut these numbers in half. What a steal! Yeah, still ain't gonna happen. Something the Brewers Association sort of admits in its launch video.
Launching the largest crowdfunding campaign in history to raise the $213 billion the market says you're worth. I'm sure it sounds like a lot because, holy crap, it is.
What they're not joking about, the Brewers Association told me, is how upset they are that AB started snatching up craft breweries.
And the confusion that's been created is strange. There's not a sense of transparency. You know, Breckenridge is sold, and you cannot tell by the beer label that they are owned by the largest global conglomerate for beer in the world.
Breckenridge Brewing didn't respond to our email this morning asking for comment. By lunch, this craft beer crowdfunding campaign already had more than $400,000 in pledges, or 0.0002% of what they need. For Next, I'm Brandon Rittiman.
We've been saying it all week. The New York Giants have no chance of beating the Broncos tomorrow.
That prediction didn't age well, but some of you are convinced that 9 News is why the Broncos lost. Broncos insider Mike Kliss directly takes on accusations of witchcraft. And I don't know what city NBC thinks that is, but it's not quite Denver. The network was super pleased when we asked about their background today. Then we go in search of the ultimate emblem of old school Colorado cool, the elusive 303 phone number. You can still get one if you know where to look. Next.
Sunshine and 70s, now that's more like it, October. I'm meteorologist Kathy Saban. Other than a few high clouds, a beautiful day today. And how about this warm weather trend? It'll last more than a day. High pressure keeping the storm track to the north of us, so all the activity is off to the east, with our next storm just now beginning to knock on the door in the Pacific Northwest. It'll be here on Friday, increasing the wind along the Front Range, bringing a little snow to the high country, and some cooler weather and the chance of a brief shower in Denver on Saturday. But not tonight. Cool, calm, and quiet. Our low at 40. Sunshine tomorrow. Temperatures back way above the average of 65. Temperatures trend above average right into the weekend, and then we see those numbers come down a little bit. Slight chance for a shower heading into the weekend, but dry weather heading out. And it is beautiful in Fort Collins tonight, Kyle.
That sound means we are getting some feedback. Tonight from Dave Douglas of Pagosa Springs, who emails, "Dear Mr. Clark, please use your considerable influence with your company's leadership to have Aaron Matus and Rod Mackey terminated from their positions immediately."
The Denver Broncos' Week 6 matchup with the New York Giants looked like a tough home game. Now it looks more like a gimme.
Their insistence all week long that the Broncos were a sure thing in the game versus the Giants was, without a doubt, a jinx against our Denver football team.
The 0-5 Giants in town to play the Broncos on Sunday night. Give me a game, right?
I think you'll agree that their use of sorcery and witchcraft has no place in the newsroom and should be dealt with swiftly and severely.
All right, I'm not even worried about a jinx. The New York Giants don't stand a chance against the Broncos on Sunday.
While I am unfamiliar with the physical layout of your building, I have seen the exterior area where the weather guessers perform. I suggest that a stake be constructed, the sorcerers Matus and Mackey be tied, and then set afire as an example to all other sports reporters.
Good evening. In come the New York Giants. Their defense stinks. Their offense stinks. They're 0-5. They don't stand a chance against the Broncos on Sunday.
Broncos fans will not tolerate the use of black art against our team.
I would say just take another bye week, take the win. But I think rules state they have to play. Go out there and whoop them.
Please advise when 9 News will broadcast this event so that I may set my DVR. Thank you, Dave Douglas, Pagosa Springs.
We have asked Broncos guy Mike Kliss a lot of Broncos questions over the years. This was the first accusation of witchcraft and sorcery.
I think this emailer makes a lot of sense, especially when you're talking about Rod Mackey. He tried to pick games last year. He wasn't very successful at it. So I do think that maybe Rod has something negative mojo going when it comes to picking the Bronco games. However, I would like to spare them the, burning up and fire and all that kind of stuff. I would say that Matus and Mackey weren't the only ones who thought the Broncos were a sure thing last week. It all started when Boomer Esiason from New York said the Broncos were going to trounce the Giants. That kind of set the narrative through the whole week. It did seem like the Broncos, they weren't overconfident, but they had the bye-week blues going into this game. And we did tell you at 9 News that turnovers is the great equalizer. And the Broncos did commit 3 turnovers that were huge in that game, none bigger than the pick 6 that Trevor Siemian threw to Janoris Jenkins. It's a crazy year in the NFL. I actually don't believe in the sorcery, although sometimes I do wonder how those point spreads get so close at the end of the game. Somebody must know something, but quite obviously, it's not Aaron Matus and Rod Mackey.
Oh, he's a point spread truther. Another viewer question that comes up every time the Broncos play on NBC Sunday Night Football. NBC rolls out this particular Denver skyline background. This is the fake news of sports backgrounds, because DIA is practically in the mountains. You see City Park, it's right up against the foothills. Cash register building is just kind of wedged in between. So we thought, well, let's ask NBC for an explanation. And we received an official corporate public relations statement in response. Let's do the corporate public relations statement reading music, please. NBC writes, every city vista is a graphic representation of the home city's important landmarks. Every week, we use pictures of those landmarks to construct appealing backgrounds for viewers that give a taste of the home city. They then told us we were the first ones to ever ask this question, as in, get out of here.
303, the emblem of our area. Our area code turned 70 years old this year. 303 once meant Colorado. It covered the entire state when AT&T laid out area codes coast to coast in 1947. And so it was until the 1980s, when the population boom and phones on the go gave us 719 and 970. And the final indignity to our original area code, that 720 overlay draped over the 303 like a wet blanket no one asked for, forcing our digits to dial those digits for the last 19 years. It was supply and demand, after all, that caused the 303 number shortage. If you demand one of the originals, it can still be had. You just need to know how to tap into the supply.
Here's how to get a 303 area code for your phone. So there are about 7.8 million combinations. 1.5 of them are available today. We called cell phone carriers around the metro area. About half seemed confident they could find you a 303 number if you wanted one. Go early in the day. New numbers are released to the carriers each morning. And if one carrier's store is out, that means that all of the stores for that carrier, say Verizon or Sprint, are going to be out of 303 numbers until the next day. Don't you come in here and try to sell me something, unless it's food. Harsh thing to say to somebody's face. So one business in Colorado just decided, well, we'll make a sign. The most Colorado thing we saw today is a sign warning solicitors to steer clear, with an exception for the Tamale Lady. Tamale Lady, you are always welcome here. At AccuTest of Northern Colorado, Alicia Hayashi works there, sent us the sign warning salespeople to get lost, but reminding the beloved tamale vendor Hilda that she is exempt from the rule. Joe Vergano gets the last word. He says, way to go. Keep the pressure on, whether left or right on the political scale. The truth is what is important. Preach it, Joe. See you next time.